Hello my lovelies, so this is Lizzie from Love From Lizi, and today I'm bringing you part 1 of my 10 cards 1 kit from the Liberty pack. So it's been a while since I've done one of these. I've tried my utmost with editing, so please bear with me. I'm jumping straight in with card 1 here, and I've pulled the stamp set from the Liberty Special Edition, and I'm taking out the sentiments saying Happy 4th of July, and I'm lining them up in my mini Misty, which for this technique is really helpful to have. I've picked out 2 Distress Oxide inks. I've got Blueprint Sketch and Lumberjack Plaid, and I'm using some purple tape just to mask off the bottom part of that stamp, because the top of the sentiment is all stars and the bottom is all stripes. So there's different ways of doing this. You can do what I'm doing, but do make sure you remove the tape. I nearly forgot a few times. The other way you can do it is you can ink it all up and then you can wipe over that little portion. But the way that I've laid them out so that they're stacked already would make it quite tricky to wipe. So I think this is probably the most easy way to do it. I do like oxide inks because they're almost like a pigment ink, so they're quite nice and thick, and you do get good coverage. I do find it, as I say, ideal with using my Misty stamping platform for this, just because you know that they are going to be back in exactly the same spot. So as you can see, I'm now covering up the top halves of the sentiments there, and I'm going in with the red. I do this a few times just to make sure that I have got proper decent coverage to get a really nice crisp sentiment. And I really like how these look. I mean, these would also work perfectly with like an embossing powder or even a black ink, because people will see that it is the stars and stripes. But that was my intention when I put these stamps together, was to be able to partially stamp, and I didn't want to do them as separate stamps because then lining them up would have been super tricky. I made sure I cleaned my hands because I had ink everywhere, and then I go and touch the card panel, which is never ideal. So here I've taken the blue pearlescent that comes as part of the special edition, and I've just used a sort of like a banner tag die, and I've cut a super thin strip. This is obviously what I do with peel-offs often, but I wanted it to match perfectly with that banner. And I've picked out a piece of the patterned paper, and I always do this because it means that I can save more card rather than just chopping it with a guillotine. And I've attached that. This is all directly onto the card base, which is a top fold landscape card. Pop some glossy accents along the back of that piece of card, and I've just laid that down flat. Once that's all glued nicely, flip it over and snip the rest. But where I wasn't sure how much glue to put in, I just found it easier just to lift up the flap somewhat and attach it that way. I've popped some foam up behind one of the lovely little Liberty lash ladies, and trimming away the extra. And then again, I'm just going to use my tape runner here to attach that banner right down onto the card front. So this is a super simple, super quick and easy. I know quite a few people like to make these sort of cards to give to like veterans and care homes. So this sort of designed card is super quick and easy, and very easy to make in batch. I've just taken the mini stars in white here just to add a little bit of interest into that blue, and I'm using all 3 sizes, as you can see, in sort of a spray from the top left down to the bottom right. So super quick and easy, nice to replicate, and again great for batch because you can keep the stamps in the right spot in your Misty, die cut loads of the tags and so on. So card number 2, I've got a stitched heart die here, and I've picked one of the pieces of patterned paper, and I've got some of Love From Lizi gold embossed cardstock that I've just pulled out from my stash, and I've taken one of the Celebrate sentiments from a previous kit of mine. Now here I'm doing some partial die cutting with a smaller banner die, so I'm laying the plate so that the top end hangs off, so I'm not actually fully die cutting all the way, as you can see there, because then that way I can flip the die around the other way once I've made sure that I've got enough space for my sentiment and that it all sits nice and pretty across the middle of the heart, and I can then work out where I want that other fishtail end to sit. And again, partial die cut, making sure that the end of my cutting plate hangs over the end, and then I'll get that lovely banner look. So again, popped that piece of vellum into my mini misty with the stamp, and I'm using my anti-static powder tool here just to make sure that there's not going to be any embossing powder sticking where I don't want it to. And I've got my Versamark ink and just inking that sentiment up nice and generously. I do always, when I'm using the misty, double ink. It's habit. It's, yeah, I mean, I'm sure the first time would have been fine, particularly with Versamark. But here I'm taking my Golden Crown embossing powder, which is a really nice ultra fine one, so it's perfect for sentiments. And then just tipping that over. I do use a coffee filter because it's super easy to pour back in. And then I just heat that up with my heat tool. I do let my heat tool heat for a few seconds, just to make sure it's nice and hot. And here I've left in the sort of the positioning and the playing around. Oh, my little pig made me these little glittery bits whilst I was crafting. It's super sweet. He's at that age now where he's 8. He's happy to sort of sit in the studio with me and just craft away himself, which is, yeah, lovely mum moments. Anyhow, I have picked up the Leaves and Vines die set, and I've picked out a few of the smaller ones, and I'm going to die cut those as well from that same embossed gold cardstock. And I have picked up a die cut here, and as you could see at the time, I was playing around with positioning, not quite sure if I wanted the hearts to be staggered or on top of one another. So I thought once I had my vines, I could play once again and see what I thought would fit best, whether it was to be on the banner or behind the hearts, or how many pieces of ephemera, if I wanted to have a couple of additional little blooms. But with that pattern paper, it's so pretty. And as you can see, I play around for ages. This usually all gets edited out, but I just wanted to let you know that I don't just sit down and think, right, I'm making this card. It is a process of playing around and trying to make things look balanced. But I kind of land on this design with an ephemera piece as well. So I pop all my dies away because they're quite small. It is the sort of thing that I will do and end up sweeping them up into the bin. And I did grab one of my old sequin mixes from a previous kit here as well, because it was all golds, blues, reds and whites, so it was perfect. And I used some glossy accents in the dot just to sort of create a little stack of sequins. I did have a little bit of trouble with getting the glue out to start with. It doesn't always want to play ball with me. And I'm using a little pickup tool here, which is really handy because the sequins can sometimes be a bit staticky, and it means that you get to place them well without your fingers being in the way. And there's that coffee filter being amazing. After I'd stacked up a couple of the sequins, leaving out blue, I hastened to add because there was already quite a bit of blue on the card. I popped a little gem in the middle, and I've trimmed down a card base, as you can see, just so that I've got a really thin border of this gold embossed. Now, if I'd have thought ahead, I could have embossed, cut the die cut heart from the middle of the gold, and it would have saved me a little bit, but I didn't decide until later. I do tape the blue heart directly onto the front because I do like a bit of 3D. I do like a bit of lift to my cards, but too much and then it won't go through the post without needing additional packaging and extra postage. So I popped some foam up on the back of the heart, which with hindsight I should have done second. I should have taped these down first just to give me a little more play at the back. But I used some tape on the back just to stick them down. And then I've got this super strong double-sided sellotape from Scotch that I just pop a tiny piece over the top just to make sure that they all stay in place and don't shimmy about once I've posted the card, because there's nothing worse than a handmade card that falls apart when you pull it out of the envelope. So I used some mini glue dots here to attach down the sequins. And one of the reasons I put the sequins in the first place on the vellum is so that I've got a really nice comfortable spot to be able to put adhesive on the back, because adhesive does often show unless you run it through like a Xyron and you've got complete adhesive across the back, it will show through the vellum. So this works great. And then remove the backing from the foam squares, from the foam. This was brilliant. I haven't used my ATG gun for months. And when I used that first bit, it obviously had a bit of dust on it, which was absolutely grim. But no one gets to see that. So here we go. That's the end of card 2. Moving into card 3, I think the ATG gun is just telling me I need to craft more. So I've got a couple of stitched rectangle dies here, and I've created a frame by taping them both down at the same time. And then I have used an ever so slightly smaller stitched rectangle to cut one of the pattern's papers that comes in the Liberty pack. I'm using a tape gun all the way right around the very edge because I want this to stick on the gold, but I also don't want there to be adhesive in the middle at the back. And as you can see now, I get my trusty little knife and I cut quite close to where the gold finishes, but not all the way in. And then I miter the edges with the knife, pop some double-sided tape down because I wanted to have a really clean finish on this and I wanted it to almost look like a photo frame. So here I'm folding the paper up, and it is quite a nice thick paper, so it did take a little bit of pressing. And then folded it up into that double-sided tape. And then I got my bone folder just to make sure that I had a really nice crease all the way along those edges, and it makes it look super tidy from the front as well. And once it's in that double-sided tape, it's not going anywhere. So now you can see I've got a really nice rounded edge on the inside. That die that I used for the inner cut on the gold frame, I've laid onto my card front so that I can place my stamps and know where the frame will sit. And I'm using the little stamps with the I Heart USA. Once I've got those positioned, popping them into my MISTI. I have become a really lazy stamper when it comes to using acrylic blocks now, just because you know that if you misstamp it, or that if you've, you just know exactly where you're going. It's all planned, it's all nice and straightforward. So anywho, here we go. I've done the red elements with the lumberjack plaid again, and I'm now going in with the blue ones. I've positioned those before I removed the red, and I have obviously left a little space between the I and the heart because they're different words, and the USA are all nicely packed together. So give those a good double stamp, and now I'm going to position my rockets. Now usually I like to use 3 of something, but 3 would have looked too crowded, and the patterned paper around the edge of the card I think meant that I could get away with 2. So I did one sort of flat on a stagger, and the second I used some foam squares just to pop it up a little bit, give it a little bit of interest. And then make sure, again with that frame, that I wasn't going to go too far up. And I did actually smudge a little bit of the ink. That's the one thing with oxides, they do take a few minutes to dry off completely, particularly on my alcohol marker friendly cardstock because it's so smooth. And here I'm going to do some watercolouring, which is not something I do very often. My mum is actually a watercolourist. She creates beautiful pictures, and I have not inherited that lucky trait. I do obviously enjoy my crafts, so I have got something from there, but watercolouring I'm not great at. So all I'm doing here is super simple. I'm popping some of the ink down on the mixed media mat, using a water brush and dropping the colour in on one side at the bottom right hand corner, and then sort of using the water in the brush to pull that colour around. It's really not complicated. If I can do it, anyone can do it. Then once that was dry, I went back in on those bottom corners again just to add a little bit extra colour, just to give it that little bit more and make sure that there weren't any hard edges. But I'm really pleased with how this turned out. I think they look almost like 3D, and yeah, I'm very proud of my watercolouring. I popped some foam tape up on the back of that frame, and then pop that down again directly onto the card base, and that is very nearly the finish of the card. I do, however, pick up some of those tiny weeny little gold gems. Oh, when I'm attaching a card front that is the size, I find standing the card up to use the craft mats much better. And here, anyway, here we go. A few little gems just to add a little bit of sparkle to pull in that gold frame at the edge. And there we go. That's the end of that card. And next up we've got card 4. I am sorry if I'm a bit clunky on the voiceover. Again, usually I record real time when I'm doing my unboxings and my product release, and it all seems to be so much more fluid. I am so out of practice, and I am going to endeavour not to be. Anywho, I've run the straight red peel off that comes in the Liberty Special Edition right up the centre of my card base, and here I'm using the brand new star border in blueberry blue along either side. So it's not strictly the flag, but it's elements of, so it's a little bit like cosplay. You know how people go Disney bounding? I'm bounding the flag here. And then I run another straight up either side. I do it all by eye. Obviously, if you're good with measuring, then crack on. But I like the handmade look where it's not necessarily particularly straight. I've got a stitched square here, and the largest is in a gold satin finish, so it's the matte mirror. And then I use some of this really pretty white with the blue and red flowers in a slightly smaller square. And then an even smaller square again, I use some of the white pearlescent from my stash. So I'm layering these up, playing around with composition. Do I want it the middle one twisted? Do I want it square? Oh, there's my head, sorry. Again, editing, haven't done for a while. But I just tape this one down, and I really do like the Gina K tape runners. She not only is she fab, but her products are brilliant as well. So strongly recommend if you're not sure where to go for a craft tape runner. And here, yes, I'm playing, do I want it square? Do I want it diamond? I landed on square so that the flower could be off centre, and I thought that looked really pretty. Pop some additional foam up on the back and add 3 little gold gems to the bottom, and that is card number 4 done. So here we are with the final one. Please let me know which is your favourite of them all, of course. I'm always interested to know. I do want to make more, and if there is a particular style that you like, let me know and I'll see if I can push for that. But here I'm using Love From Lizi pinstripe background red rubber stamp, which I absolutely love. Super soft, and all you do with the MISTI is just pull the mat out of the back so that you're pretty much stamping directly into the back. I do leave a sheet in so I don't get ink all over the back of my MISTI. But yep, inking that up. This is a really pretty sort of pearlescent red ink. So it does have a bit of shine. We all know I love a bit of shine. And I've pulled up some more of these Bunting dies in 4 different sizes, and I'm using the red and the white pearlescent that come in the Liberty pack. And I'm stealing some of the waist stars, if you like, from the blueberry blue star borders, and I'm just running those up the centremost bunting piece, because obviously we've got the stripes on the background, so we need the stars as well. And I arrange the 4 flags in a stacked fashion, hold them all in my hand, make sure I'm happy with how it's all positioned, and then lay them all flat and cheat by popping a bit of tape all over the back of them. Obviously you can position these directly onto your card front. I didn't want too much lift to the card, so once I've taped them all, I open them up in sort of a concertina fashion and then use my tape runner just down those pieces to make them super secure. I do pop up my little star bunting piece with some foam squares, and I've picked one of the little red-headed Liberty ladies holding a lollipop, and then pop some Scotch tape all over the back of the bunting pieces. And I do overhang it ever so slightly to the top so that I can snip off those stitched edges so that they look all different lengths. And then that goes down onto a card base. And because of all the lift, I put the tape directly on the card base rather than on the panel. And that is card number 5. I really hope that you've liked them all. Let me know which is the favourite, and I'll be back with you soon. Bye.